there's no one size fits all, right? There's never a one size fits all. When it comes to family wealth, it is completely bespoke, and it has to be driven by, first and foremost, what is the results? What are the outcomes? What are the objectives you're looking for? That is the North Star of what legal structures, financial strategies, everything. When you know what the outcome is, you start with the end in mind, and then you reverse engineer. And that tells you, or at least tells me and my team, really what vehicles we should be looking at. Now, from my experience, which is now spanning, at the time of this recording, about 25 years, which is wild, most people need some form of a trust. Not everybody, but the reason why it's important, whether you're worth tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, it's a matter of starting with the end in mind, right? What is the results you want for your wealth if something should happen to you? Now, whether you're uber wealthy or you're the millionaire next door, it's really important to kind of game theory this out. If you weren't here, if your spouse wasn't here, what feasibly can happen? So let's say you're the millionaire next door, right? And you're between, say, $3 to $5 million. You have $5 million of your wealth, and something happens to you and your spouse. And now your children and your grandchildren inherit all this money, and it's through the function of a will. Now, that's all well and good, but here's the issue. Let's say out of your $5 million, you've got 2 homes. You have one home in Florida and one home in New York. Okay. And those homes are worth, say, 1.5 million total, 750 each. And the rest are in investment vehicles and IRAs and things along those lines. So why it gets kind of problematic when you just have a will? Well, now your heirs are exposed to what's known as probate. Now, probate is just the court function of getting the assets to the designated heirs of your estate plan. Now, that can be timely, costly, and also, if you have property in multiple states, and your children or your grandchildren or whatever heirs of your will are dealing with probate courts in multiple jurisdictions now. Now, that can be timely and costly. Where this could become problematic, let's say they wanted to sell a piece of real estate because they had a buyer, the timing was right, they didn't want to use the real estate, the upkeep of the real estate was dwindling the estate value, right? And if you're the millionaire next door, that's a big deal. And this is where it becomes an issue. That might take 6 months, and you have legal fees and court documents and travel back and forth, and you may lose out the opportunity on the market or the buyer to do that. So that's where it becomes problematic. Now, another thing to take into consideration if you don't have a trust vehicle is that it is public record. So when you go through probate court, right, which is just a function of a will, it is public record. Now, why does that matter? Well, there are unfortunately a lot of bad actors in this world that in some cases target people inheriting large sums of wealth. And it doesn't mean you have to be inheriting hundreds of millions of dollars. If, let's say, there's a young family and you have young children or like early adults, it could be even older adults that just don't know what's going on, don't have the right financial team around them, and they inherit a couple of $1 million. If there is a bad actor that's looking through the court documents, they potentially become a target of financial victimhood. And so those are things that I think would be important to protect against. And so when you have assets that are titled in a trust, right, you sidestep the probate court because the trust didn't die. I'm not to be morbid, but you did, right? And that's a tough thing to hear, but the trust didn't die. So look at this place that we recently bought, right? So this held in, let's say, a trust vehicle. I can still use it. I can swim in the pool, I can go in the lake, I can sleep in the bed, I can use the kitchen, I can do all the things as if it was in my name. But if something happens to me, this is owned in a different state, right? This is in New York. My main house is in Connecticut. So this way, if something happens to me and something happens to my significant other, if something happens to Stephanie, right, this is held in a trust and it bypasses right to the beneficiaries of the trust. Does that make sense?